the University of Austin. It's backed by a guy named Joe Lonsdale, who's a co-founder of Palantir, which is kind of like in the same way that I'm a co-founder of Defector. Palantir is kind of doing the same thing that we're doing in sports media for state surveillance. And that, so again, another space that really you'd want to see given a kick in the pants so that you could better have your face recognized by the NSA. So he's a creep, seems like, just like a Silicon Valley, like Peter Thiel associate type of dude. So this was his sort of dream thing that was announced by Bari Weiss's Substack. So you're going to hear basically is a lot of names that if you're a normal person that's watching this, most of these names aren't going to mean anything to you. And if you're somebody who, like me, goes online and gets upset all day about the same like 10 people, like all 10 of those people are involved in this school. It's basically like an attempt at a libertarian liberal arts university where people that are like mostly known for being grouchy in print or for having been fired from state schools for being so disagreeable about like gender and race. Like this is a place where all of them can get together and I guess like just teach classes about the racial aspect of crime stats.
Do we have a sense of how this is going to be? Is this going to be a brick and mortar thing, or is it going to be all it is the plan,
right? So that was the part that
I don't know. I can't decipher. Like, is this going to be just like an online type of like what is it, the University of Phoenix or something like that? Yeah, it's all online, or is this going to be a brick and mortar? And they're, what I'm also fascinated by is that they're trying to get a not-for-profit status for it, and I wouldn't be surprised for them to say like, we couldn't get one, so we're going to have to be a for-profit institution.
Yeah, we got canceled by the tax man when we were trying to start our school that was going to give degrees in like optimism and like owning.
But do we
Bitcoin.
know, is it going to be brick and mortar?
That's what they say. So the thing about it that's like, so it's different than like Prager University, for instance, another proud American institution. That's a
or Trump YouTube University.
Channel.
It's different from Trump University.
And Trump University's brick and mortar, like that was just like the banquet space at the Radisson, where you could like get people together to talk about flipping houses or whatever, and then get their picture taken next to like a cardboard cutout of the man himself. This, they've like, a little bit of money's been spent on it already. Like they don't have a space of their own. Like the address on their website is like an oil and gas law company in Austin. Like it's basically just office space that they have there. But they hired a guy away from the St. John's College in Annapolis, which is like a great books university. And he's, you know, there's a whole other thing about like great books education that I'm not nearly informed enough to really go on about. But it's like, it's a real thing, you know, like they read Plato and they talk about it. And that's nice. It's better than what I did in college, probably get more out of it than what I got out of what I did in college, but it's real. Like, and they, in their announcement, they're like, yeah, we're looking for space. Like we want to have buildings, we want to have residences, but also their timeline for all of this is extremely ambitious. And I don't know, especially putting it in Austin, which is in the middle of this incredible gentrifying surge. Like, well, it's not like there's a ton of space there.
But that's what I find sort of like fascinating. Why Austin? I mean, if you're looking for space, why would you go to Austin? Is it because that there's like a tech boom there and and there's some founder? Is the founder money there?
I mean, the founder is in Silicon Valley, as far as I know, like everybody else that's up there, you know, like just sort of like living in like a really nice suburb, like living in Palo Alto and just spending all day fuming about the guy who's the district attorney for San Francisco. That's basically like that lifestyle now.
Right.
But the Austin element, like on their website, they have like a, you know, FAQ section. And in addressing the Austin thing, the literal sentence that they have for it is like, if it's good enough for Joe Rogan and Elon Musk, it's good enough for us. Just kidding. It's actually because it's like this big hub of culture. But like when you are like, you're starting a university and you're also going out of your way to be like, we're the university that likes Joe Rogan and that wants to try to bring a Joe Rogan approach to pedagogy to your kids. Like that signals to me that you are not serious.
What?
Yeah. I mean, it depends. Like maybe I'm being unfair. Obviously Elon, of course, hard to gainsay. He's accomplished so much. I mean, just no one has been more epic. probably than him over the last.
Do you have a sense of why they named it? And hey, David, by the way.
Hi. Hey, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Do you have a sense of why they named it University of Austin? Because it's pretty close to University of Texas at Austin.
Yes.
I
why?
literally just said practically.
Yeah.
By mistake, I said it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, is to confuse people deliberately, or?
It's really weird. You would think that they would start, like, I was hoping for a more ambitious name, because like usually when you see like things that are funded by rich libertarians at universities, it's like there's a lot of them now, but they usually have hilarious names, like either really grandiose things or they're like the Publius Institute at James Madison University. And you're like, oh, that's like a Coke thing because they like things when they sound Latin. And then, or like Mercatus is the funny one. That's the one at George Mason. And it's like they're trying to sort of like retcon some respectability onto like just the worst and most unpopular ideas in human history. Like, and that's, good for them, I guess, in that regard. But like, this is a big swing as a school. Like they want to be the place where all of my least favorite Twitter posters are teaching as like tenured professionals.
Are they all going to move to Austin?
They're not going to.
Like, I don't understand. Like I just feel like the like, did you think Bari Weiss like jumped the gun here? I mean, this just seems like a very weird time in the process to have an array of like, who are these people? They're all going to be teachers there. Is that, I mean,
it's
like,
hard to say. There's
like
if
you're
advisors.
Like, that's the thing is that because I think there's other clues that it may not be serious is, I guess, my point. It's not just the Joe Rogan and Elon Musk and their FAQ. That the other clues feel to me like you're going to get buildings. You're going to establish a curriculum. And none of that's happened, but you do have a FAQ and a whole list of people you've already hired to be your teachers.
Or they're just like willing to lend their names to it. That part of it is amazing, though. It's like, I guess, there haven't been that many new universities founded since, in my lifetime. This is the first one that has like a sizzle reel, that has like one of those things. That's what
I mean. Like, this is like you guys launching some type of like streaming app. Like what, like you're trying to get people like, this is not the way that you like, and what are they trying to do? Are they trying to raise funds from?
Yes.
Oh, is that what's going on?
That's basically it. I mean, I think that they're like the initial public offering of this idea was mainly like, do you want to become one of our founders? Because I think it's like $250 million they're trying to raise for it. And so
wait a second. Let me just see what I have in my banking app.
Because it's like the sort of thing where if you give enough, like what if the football team played in a stadium with your name on it? And there's a big statue of you out front with a microphone. So you think about it, that could be yours for just, I don't know if you have like $75 million or something like that you'd want to contribute. Yeah, it's definitely worth checking. They take Venmo, I think.
They will take a Venmo? All right.
Yeah.
Well,
but it's like, that's a huge ask. Even if you can see, I mean, like they're definitely targeting at a certain type of person who has money. It's just like, the idea of being like, wouldn't it be incredible if all of these people that like post about gender and crime all the time, like what if they were all in the same place and like teaching kids about stuff like that? Wouldn't that be sick? And wouldn't the people that you hate the most be amazed and angered by it? But that's the part of it that I think is like, again, signals that it's not serious, is that there's this fundraising element, which again is not traditionally done through social media channels on this scale. And then when you look at on their sort of like, what can you do in the FAQ thing, where it's like, well, how can I help? I like this project. They're like, well, you can give us money. And then after that, they're like, if you don't have the kind of money that if you are not comfortable donating $1 million to our imaginary college, like you could just post about us online. And that's like sort of posited as like the other way that you can help, like that either you can cut a 7-figure check or you could like attach a couple of like cry laughing emojis to the announcement and like do the same work.
It's so thirsty for money. We have this FAQ up, and Bradley, if you could put this up. If you scroll to the bottom, it says, "Sounds great. How can I support you?" And every dollar counts. You can support us financially by going to our support us page. And then if you go to the bottom even further, I'm not rich, but I want to help. What can I do? We're grateful for any gift of any size. Like, just so, please, just anything. $17 donation, whatever you want.
I'm broke. Well, we'll still take money from you.
Think of the idea of Barry Weiss cutting one of those, like, I'm once again asking for your support videos.
Crowdfunding university. That's one way to do it, right?
Hit the donate button, because I find this is what's sort of amazing to me. You're waiting to see if you're going to get a nonprofit status. Wouldn't that like greatly like change the implications of this donation? Like, keep going down. Like, I mean, where does this donation go to? Go back one. Like, what are they like? Is this like one of those like Indiegogo things? Like, if it doesn't get funded, do we get our money back? Or is this just sort of like, well, sorry, we couldn't do it?
It's a chicken or the egg thing. You know, what comes first, the
contributors
status
to
or the
Cicero?
money?
Oh, you're right. They did this.
So Cicero Research, that's Lonsdale's. That's sort of the shell thing for this. It's a nonprofit that otherwise has nothing on their docket that anyone can find. And that's like sort of the mechanism through which this is going to be funded. That, like, I think it is like, because otherwise they still have to do, and they will eventually have to jump through all of the hoops that every college does. Like, they're going to have to do like Title IX compliance and like all the shit that actually like makes colleges expensive, or, you know, one of the things that makes colleges expensive. But right now it's just, you can give money to the Cicero Institute, which I guess does kind of cover the.
That's exactly right. The weird,
why isn't this pretentiously named enough? Like,
I mean, I love one. This just seems like one of those old Kickstarters. Do you remember those? Like that. I mean, that's kind of it. GoFundMe's replaced that a little bit, but I love like envisioning what their different, you know, institutions will look like their athletic building. Who they're going to name that after? I don't know how many athletes are going to be involved in this, but I mean, maybe Joe Rogan. Maybe it'll be the Joe Rogan
Rogan Dome.
Yeah, the Joe Rogan Dome and Jordan Peterson's School of Psychology.
Yeah,
that's what's gonna.
There's so much. If you look at the degrees that they're granting to, it's like
how are they granting degrees?
Well, they're not doing it yet.
The thing is, like, I just don't like. This is just bizarro.
So they're going to start. Their first course is going to start this summer, and it's called the Forbidden Courses or something incredible like that. And it's just basically, I think, like a place where you can. It's going to be. I don't think it's going to confer credit. It's for undergrads. Right. And they're going to, like, I guess, get together at like a WeWork in Austin and just talk about phrenology with like Professor Andrew Sullivan for a long time.
Yes, skull sizes.
Yeah,
I definitely feel like this is going to be like, it's more like the Pompeii Foundation. Like, at one point, like, it's just everybody's just they're going to get all this money come in and just be like, all right, we couldn't do it, but at least you got a tax deduction and we tried. And that's the important part. That's what makes we wanted to learn here.
The Kickstarter thing funnier too, because it's like there were cases of like Kickstarters back when that was like a big deal. I think it was like one of the guys from Animal Collective raised like $100,000 to make an album and then just like never made the album.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
And like that can happen, you know, like it's the sort of thing where like you're just like basically telling Amanda Palmer that you respect her so much that you're going to give her $1,000 on spec and hope that you're going to get something back from it, but she doesn't owe you shit after that.
Oh yeah, and like worst case scenario for them, they're able to just cash out a little bit. I mean, I don't know, Sam, you can go, but I'm just curious if they're the plan B is to set up some sort of PAC where they can dubiously fund themselves. Which, I mean, there's so many sham PACs out there, people don't realize.
That's what this is.
Yeah, well,
it's already there, right?
Is that what the language says? I mean, what language? I guess, but
yeah, it's so nascent. It's hard to even say.
Yeah,
what the goal is. I think the thing that in trying to like write about it and stuff, it's like I don't trust it, not because I know anything about it. No one really does know anything about it. And the like this thing that's on Bari Weiss's Substack, that the Pano Canelos or whatever his name is, the guy that they hired from St. John's, it's like a familiar experience if you've read a lot of stuff that people like this write, where it's like they'll get halfway through describing a problem and you're like, I actually agree with this so far. And like, colleges are too expensive. There's too much administrative shit. It's not, you know, and it feels too much like a business. And then when they get to the part where they make their argument, you realize that you are in space. Right. And that like, it's just they don't have an understanding of it that tracks with any available experience here on Earth, but they have their own sort of like way of addressing it. And so in this case, the idea that like colleges are too censorious and that, you know, professors are not respected merely because they have dedicated themselves entirely trying to prove that trans people aren't real or whatever the fuck it is. And then like their peers don't want to work with them, students don't want to learn from them, that like that is seen as like the actual problem that undergirds all of this. And that like, I think that like for people that trust the market and free market forces so much and that want to make that a big part of this, at some point, like people are voting with their feet on like whether they want to learn from the anti-vax psychology professor at Portland State University. Like, you know, take the hint. Like that's clearly what it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it is, I mean, I'm curious once they get there, if the Cicero Foundation is a nonprofit, right? And they're running it through that, they're going to have to release like what people are getting paid. I'm curious to find out, like, is Bari Weiss doing this like for free? She's doing this for the sake of education at the moment. You know, I'm really struck by what's happening with these type of enterprises, because I mean, ultimately this is going to be some type of like, if not for profit, you know, quasi type of situation where I find it hard to believe they're going to get accredited. But if they do, it's going to be just for them to get student loans. I mean, that's the other thing that's sort of like, you know, I know how these for-profit university scams run, essentially.
You can make a lot of money doing that.
I mean, people can go look at, like, you know, these are Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah. But the getting accredited part, they haven't really, like they say on the website that they're pursuing accreditation and they think that they're going to get it really fast, like much faster than schools are usually accredited. But then they say that they're pursuing it through an accreditation agency that is not recognized by the state of Texas. Like, it just doesn't seem like this was ready to come out of the oven yet.
Well, that's what I'm curious about. Like, I wonder if Bari Weiss was sort of jumping the gun here and, you know, wanted like, I have nothing to write this week.
I'll just give it 1,300 words on education from Pano Canelos. Maybe my readers would like that.
Exactly. I don't know. I find the whole thing bizarre, but it's interesting. And this is a little bit unrelated, but in some ways there definitely seems to be like a thing happening here that there was just a press release the other day about Callin. Have you heard of this? It is a social
That's the
podcast
network.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it is the Glenn Greenwald is the headliner.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Taibbi, Brianna Joy Gray, Antonio Garcia Martinez, and Andre Demise. It is sort of like,
sorry?
What is it?
Callin.
And it's sort of like a Clubhouse competitor, but with some other features. And they're, you know, Greenwald's the top one, and then Taibbi, Brianna Joy Gray. I just named, and there's others. Katie Boyle, Michael Eckhart, Troy Burks, Alex Anstead, Michael Quatwaramani, Brian Hobart, Jerry Lee, Melissa Tomac, Noor Siddiqui, Misty Maris. I don't know.
They're just going to get together and like chop it up with each other, like talk about
Democrats. I think they're their own podcast platform. There might be other type of aspect to it, but it is all venture capital money. And it's
another Teal adjacent guy. It's David Sachs is the money behind it, right?
Yes. And like, I wonder how much of this is, I mean, it's obviously people want to make a profit here on these things, but there does seem to be a real exertion of political, of ideological entrepreneurship happening within that sort of libertarian. We're you know, it's like a third front on the culture war on some level.
Yeah. Cause I think it's like similar to what the Koch brothers did for generations, but they were much, you know, they're stodgier. Like that's like kind of, it's a different approach. It's like this Midwestern and not like the ambitions were any less grand, or that, you know, it hasn't succeeded, because it has. That they basically took these sort of dumb and obscure ideas about how the world works, an economic understanding of things, but as sort of like as a politics in itself, and they made it respectable. They they endowed chairs at the schools that you want to be associated with. They built institutes, they built buildings to put the teachers in. And then like over the course of a couple of generations, people start seeing it as respectable. Whereas instead it was like, you know, a couple of guys at the University of Chicago, and then just like people you would not make eye contact as you walk by on the street, like waving a pamphlet at you.
Yep.
And in this case, like, I think that it's weird to be sort of present at the creation for a similar type of thing, because I don't think that this is really any less ambitious. And I don't think that the ideology is really all that different. I think that what is sort of always like the part that trips you up with libertarians, for me anyway, is that like, I'm 25% of the way there with them a lot of the time, you know, that like a lot of it is about like, I'm fine. I want people to be able to be free to do what they want to do.
Right.
It's just a question of like, there's always a point where you hit the ceiling with them in terms of like what they're actually willing to be open to and what they're willing to sort of permit. And I mean, for the Kochs, it's always like, they're libertarian only insofar. I mean, it starts with not wanting to pay taxes. And then from there, there's like a whole other thing that grows up out of that. I think with the University of Austin shit, especially because so much of it is about gender and involves like, I mean, so many of the names that are on that list are people that are like, I'm not, you know, they're TERFs. I mean, they're just like people that have made being anti-trans in kind of a provocative and trollish way a big part of their identity and their professional lives. That like, that is like, you can see the ceiling right there, that they're like, it's fine to be gay, like, and that's okay with us. Like, so that's a step ahead of where like, you know, whatever the Kochs used to be. But like, then this is the upper boundary of what we're actually willing to tolerate. And so above that, it's like the idea that the school keeps talking about the pursuit of truth and all that, beyond the fact that I don't really think that that's a very meaningful statement for a college to make. I think that like, you can see the type of truths that these guys are interested in are not ennobling human truths. They're like, are minorities inherently more criminal than white people? Are trans people real? That's like what they mean by truth. And the idea there of like, it's not about an understanding. It's as with all this libertarian stuff, it's a process of working backwards from a conclusion and then creating an ideology that supports it.
Mm.
I mean, you know, every time we have a conversation about stuff like this, you know, I cite that Corey Robin book, The Reactionary Mind, because he describes it as, I mean, not this particularly, although he probably would, is, you know, the idea that we're going to repackage all of, or the vast majority of the sort of structural, hierarchical dynamics that have been plaguing us forever, but we're going to repackage it in a way that's going to make it seem like it's daring and new.
Right.
I mean, it's like, it's, you know, 15 years ago, it was the free market Fonzie that we would talk about, that guy who was the Reason editor. And it's really the same sort of like a dynamic. And that's why it's, you know, it's a slightly different variant of a culture war that they're fighting.
Yeah.
That ostensibly is dressed up in a lot of different ways. And it is, I think you're right. It is fascinating to sort of like watch the development of this, and people, you know, hopefully there'll be a lot more written about like, you know, who these VC people are and what other endeavors they're engaged in, and just how broad Peter Thiel's tail, or how long Peter Thiel's tail is, I guess.
Yeah. I think that the thing that and again, like, you know, this has been a rough few years for like causality as a thing, just as a concept, you know, like understanding that like, if one thing happens, then something else happens. Like, I don't know that I believe that as much as I did, you know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Like, it's frustrating and it makes you feel like you're losing your mind all the time. But it can also be funny if you're in a situation like this, where it's like, these are not terribly appealing people. These are not terribly appealing ideas. Like they can be appealing in, you know, a sort of a surface level. But the reason they keep having to fucking reskin the brand is that sooner or later, like, it's hard to keep this cool. It's hard to make like intolerance and like cutting the highest tax bracket or whatever. Like, you can sell that to some people, to people who are intolerant and already rich. Like, it's easy enough to do that. But at some point, it's like, it's hard to convince somebody that's on the wrong side of the way that power works that they actually, either that they deserve to be there, or that you've like, I mean, you can keep selling them, you know, the one weird trick that gets you onto the right side of the continuum. But I don't think that the actual solutions on offer here don't work.
It's also fascinating to me how like I mean, just in reference to the Colin thing, there will always be a new crop of money, and it'll come from different flavors and different sources for leftist voices that will only criticize the left. And then once they run out of their usefulness or it's not as helpful, there will be a new iteration of it. But it just depends. I mean, on this will maybe last for a year and then go away. That there will always be an appetite for that, but you can only suck that bone dry for so long before it's completely dry. I guess.
Like the subsidy is endless, but the ideology is really time limited and capped.
And the voices only have credibility for so long in that area. I mean,
I think that's the part
Greenwald's almost done with
and ultimately, what's interesting to me about this is these contrary. You know, this is the play is let's bring in some contrarians. I mean, in both instances that we're talking about, and the way that these contrarians work, and the reason why they're brought in is also because they've established their own brands. And the fascinating thing about this is that they also are not going to sacrifice their own brands and their own enterprises for this thing. Like, there's no way that Glenn Greenwald has enough equity in this that at the end of the day, he is going to, or any of these people are going to, sacrifice what they need to sacrifice to bring people there. Right. Like, you know, like we just did it. We just ended a second show that we did on Peacock, or we just had a show on Peacock where they would play the Majority Report on Peacock. And, at one point, I think they were hoping that people who watch us on YouTube would migrate over there. And I'm like, why would I encourage that? You're already, why?
Yeah, I'm in business for myself. I think that's the thing with all the Substack types too, that like, especially like Bari Weiss, I'm not a huge fan of her writing. I think her major professionals. Yeah, sorry. I just mean sentence by sentence. I think.
How dare you?
Embarrassingly. Yeah, I know. And this is the sort of bold truth that I'm willing to come on your show. And I know that no one else that you'd have on would dare say it.
Okay, yeah, jealous. That's fine. Professional jealousy.
The part of it that's amazing to me is that she's leveraged her skill, which I think is like being somebody that like rich, mean dad types think would be cool to have as their daughter. That like, that's basically like what she does well. That Substack is like, she's making like the sort of money that like the guy that pitched the 7th inning for the Mets this year. And she's making it just off her fucking posts.
Yep.
Like I don't think that's good, but it's hard to like say that she's going to throw away Aaron Loop money to go to Austin to teach a Zoom class to a bunch of unbearable kids.
Exactly. Like, I mean, that's my point is I think like a lot of this is going to sort of like these endeavors ultimately collapse on their own weight, like, how do you promote your Colin and your Substack in the relentless way that you need to, and you of course are going to just like, you're going to promote the one that puts, $1 of every dollar in your pocket instead of, 3 cents of every dollar in your pocket.
There is kind of like an inspiring network of all these people like putting each other on and boosting each other up or whatever. I mean, if the ideas weren't so bad, it would be very nice.
You're absolutely, this is something that I've watched on the right for years. Mm-hmm. I mean, on the heart, like you just watch that circle jerk with the, Shapiro and Rubin and, all those other people, and they just get around and this is developed in this space. I mean, I hesitate to,
but yeah.
And
Yes.
the left could take some pointers here, but unfortunately, like when there's a lot of money involved on the right or with the IDW, it makes it a lot easier to be more collaborative, where in left media spaces, there's less money.
Yes.
We could do it.
I think
we
that's
could do
true.
it.
And I think, sorry to interrupt, Sam, I just think the other thing I'd add to that is that they only say the same three things about the same three issues all the time. And so I think that there is, for all the idea of this being like sort of bold, heterodox thinking or whatever, like they're just like praising each other for rephrasing each other's posts. And so that makes it easier, I think, in some ways, and they're only linking to each other and all of that. And I think that, like, again, echo chambers exist across the political spectrum. I just think it's easier when everybody says the same things all the time, which I think is, like, for all the failings of the discourse on our side of the continuum, like, I think is less so. I think that there's more, it's less lockstep. And also, like, people are responding to actual things in the news as opposed to, like, in this case, like, where it is really all about, like, the West, gender, and race. And it's the same things about that.
And really just like one half of the equation.
Yes.
Right? Like where there is some disruption in essentially the status quo that has existed for ad infinitum.
Yeah.
David, much appreciated. People can find your Substack where?
It is at Truth Warrior. I'm guesting on Bari's thing this week about how I think that the Eternals is Marxist.